of the cave. We've got the King's Palace, of course, that gives this whole tour its name. We'll also be seeing the Papoose Room, the Queen's Chamber, and the Green Lake Room. To get to the King's Palace, which is its own separate route, we do have to walk for a few minutes to get there. And over the next 5 or 6 minutes as we're walking, we'll be on very small portions of the 2 self-guided trails. We begin by just starting the same very beginning of the Big Room trail. Has anyone already done the Big Room? That's a self-guided area. We've got a few today. All right. Now that's open all day long. So if that's something you'll want to see later, it'll definitely be open after this tour is over. And we're only going to be seeing a tiny little section of it, because just around the corner, we're coming to an intersection of trails. The Big Room Trail intersects with the Natural Entrance self-guided trail. That's if you hike all the way down from the surface. Has anyone done that this morning? Yes, got a few. Or yesterday? All right, we've got a few. The King's Palace is actually about 80 feet lower than where we are right now. So we're going to be descending in a few minutes down paved switchback trails to the level of the King's Palace. 80 feet is about the equivalent of an 8-story building, okay? Once we're down the 80 feet, all 4 rooms are on the same level. Then once we get to the Green Lake Room, we will have to start climbing back up. That's the rule of being in caves, is that if you go down, you are then committed to doing the same thing up. So at the end of the tour, we've got an 80-foot ascent. Just like going down, it's on paved switchback trails. There is one difference. There will be a set of stairs on the way up as well. Just one set, about 18 steps. Just want everyone to be aware of that before we get started. We're going to be 830 feet underground, and imagine being the first person down this far, because of course that would be no trails or elevators to help us out, and that can be quite challenging. Once we're down to the level of the King's Palace, I'll tell you about the first person we know of who ever made it this far and what he had to deal with. Folks, there's a bat flying through here. Oh, there he is.
You can still hike out.
He got lost.
He did get lost.
She can take the elevator.
Wow. That's unusual.
Still in Sherman.
Yeah. Folks, as we keep walking down, please don't bother the bat by shining lights or anything at it, but it seems like we have a confused bat in here. For the most part, it's very rare to see a bat here in the wintertime. The Brazilian three-tailed colony that we're famous for, they migrate south in winter. And then there's 2 other species of bats that live here as well, cave myotis and fringe myotis, but they are typically hibernating species throughout winter. They don't hibernate in Carlsbad Caverns either, or if they do, we haven't figured out where they hibernate. This past fall, we actually had quite a bit of water dripping in the Big Room because we had a very rainy monsoon season for once this summer. But things seem to be, a lot of the drips seem to be slowing down again instead of being as fast as they were. We'll see a few active areas even through here, but even in our busiest, most wet times in the cave, it's still overall pretty dry. 1898, although the exact date is unknown, but Jim White, when he was about 16 years old, first started exploring this cave. He didn't discover it by any means. He knew of this great big hole, Bat Cave is what the locals called it. A lot of people knew about it because the bats flying out of it in the summer evenings, for one, is rather noticeable. Just others exploring the area had already seen this hole, but it seems like he was the first person to ever go beyond just the entrance of the cave into the dark zone, where there are steep drop-offs, mazes of passageways going off in every direction. Well, Jim one evening was watching the bats fly out. He had heard about it, he had never seen it before, and he was watching the bats fly out, and his curiosity got the better of him, and he wondered how big of a hole this really was to hold what seemed to him to be millions and millions of bats flying out. He didn't have a whole lot of cave exploring background. In fact, he had never been in a cave before, but he knew he needed a few things. He needed light, so he had a lantern, and he needed a way to get in and out of the incredibly steep entrance. Maybe that's what prevented anyone earlier than him from ever getting it. So he made himself a homemade ladder, about 40 feet long. He needed it, and he had a lantern, and all by himself he started exploring this cave. He didn't make it down all the way to the King's Palace, 830 feet underground on his first try, because very, very soon he realized he better be careful. This is a huge cave. It could be really easy to get lost. And so he took his time making it all the way down here. And as he went, he was marking his trails in various fashions, including holding his lantern up to the walls, leaving behind black smudge marks. You might notice them here and there. Sometimes he'd break off formations, he said, to kind of point the way out. But then he was also building a mental map of the cave. And so he would get his imagination inspired by all the cool things he was seeing and started naming his landmarks, naming different rooms of the cave, naming different features. And by the time he got down here, he was convinced this was the most beautiful place he had ever seen, and his names of the places reflected that. When he came into this room, he thought this was fit for royalty, and that's how it got its name, the King's Palace. However, as much as he was enjoying this cave and enjoying the fun of scrambling around, trying to find new stuff, always remembering his way back out, he had a really hard time convincing anyone else that this cave was worth seeing. They knew it was a bat cave, they knew there were lots of bats in here, that there was lots of guano, but he was trying to explain that there was lots of beautiful things to see too, and not a whole lot of folks wanted to take him up on his offer to lead them deep, deep underground to show him. Well, until he convinced a young local photographer from Carlsbad to come on down and said, okay, maybe I can't describe with words what I'm seeing here, but maybe some photos will show everyone I'm not crazy, I'm not making it up, there's a lot of cool things to see, and it was worth their while. Because navigating through the cave, exploring the cave, just getting down here was really tough 100 years ago. There were no elevators, there were no paved trails, or any sort of trail system, really. And so people had to really be convinced that it would be worth all their efforts. natural way in and out of the Papoose Room, like I mentioned, it'll be the way we exit next to the Queen's Chambers, where we're going next. In here, things are a little bit smaller. Maybe that's how this room got its name. We don't know. It's a Jim White name, but we don't know why he gave it that name. Sometimes we lose those sorts of reasons. We saw the little ones in the tunnel. 83 years of drifting. What did it get you? Not a whole lot, huh? These formations grow one droplet at a time. Water from the surface in the form of rain or snow serves as a weak carbonic acid, a little bit of carbon dioxide and water. That's all you need as it travels through the limestone rock. And this can take months and months for water that falls on the surface to get down here. But as it's traveling through the limestone, since it's serving as a weak acid, it can actually dissolve the minerals right out of the limestone, the calcium carbonate, and bring the mineral with it to redeposit it in the cave. When a drop of water comes to the ceiling here, forms on the ceiling after traveling through hundreds of feet of rock, the mineral that's been dissolved in that water now has the opportunity to recrystallize. It normally crystallizes as calcite, and that's what all the formations in here are made of. Formations growing really slowly on the ceiling, the water is still hanging out there. The calcite will form while the water is still there. It forms around the edge. It's a little ring of calcite, right? And each drop of water, if it continues dripping really slowly, new ring will add on to the previous ones, and you get these long, skinny, hollow formations. They really are built up of rings hanging onto the ceiling. If you take a look now just around the ceiling, you might spot these. They're as skinny as a pencil, okay? You can't always tell they're hollow unless you break one off and look at it, so I don't recommend that. But they are hollow, and that's where they get their name from. Does anyone know what we call those really skinny ones? That's right. Got our soda straws here. Skinny little straws hanging onto the ceiling. What do we call that classic cave formation hanging tight to the ceiling? That's right, our stalactites. And then if you look out onto the floor, the opposite of a stalactite, what grows up from the ground? That's right, our stalagmites. They have a G in the middle of their word for ground, right? Stalactites have a C for ceiling. They still form, stalagmites still form by water dripping. It's just that the water drips a little faster. Now the calcite adheres to the ceiling, instead drips down to the floor and starts building upwards. for a second, so I am going to ask everyone to come on in here and have a seat. When the lights go out, it's not the time to learn you have balance issues, right? So there were packed dirt trails by the end of the decade. There were wooden stairs coming all the way from the entrance down to the underground lunchroom so that folks could walk down 80 flights of stairs. The elevators were actually operated by 1931, so early on we had elevators too. But it wasn't enough just to have trails and ladders or stairs and everything. They needed to be able to see, maybe we could catch the street. And so they started installing the electric lighting system. First system went to the page in 1927. Big floodlights all along the trails, just lighting up everything. Apparently not much was left to the imagination. No shadows, all light everywhere. And great, everyone can see what they're doing and walk along. They didn't have to carry lanterns anymore, their own little flashlights. But the first lighting system of the cave wasn't the most reliable in the world. We'll see what would happen sometime. But first I want you to imagine you are there in 1927 when the lights first went in. All right, take your last looks around, and then I'm going to turn the light back on. Here it goes. How did you like the blackout?
Thank you.